On the horizon, rising clouds of dust signaled a massive storm approaching. A Confederate army of 10,000 vengeful warriors from across the Arabian Peninsula was marching with a single goal: to wipe out the heavily outnumbered Muslims in Medina. Medina was largely protected by its own geography. Look at this rugged terrain guarding the city's perimeter. On three sides, the defenders were shielded by impassable volcanic rock, thick date palm groves, and steep mountains. But there was a fatal flaw in this natural armor. This map shows how those southern, eastern, and western barriers left one wide open corridor to the north, and the 10,000-man enemy army was marching straight for it. To seal that gap, a Persian companion named Salman Al-Farisi proposed a tactic entirely alien to Arabian warfare: digging a 6-kilometer-long trench right across the open corridor. The execution of this plan bordered on the impossible. The defenders had less than 10 days before the Confederate forces arrived. In that narrow window, they had to carve a chasm 9 meters wide and 4.5 meters deep, entirely out of desert rock. To survive total annihilation, this heavily outgunned force had to engineer an impenetrable geographic choke point against a relentless ticking clock. The physical toll of this excavation was brutal. Arabia was suffering from a severe famine, and the nights were freezing. The men were so hungry they tied stones to their stomachs to dull the pain. Yet the Prophet Muhammad worked side by side with them, swinging a pickaxe in the trench. Amidst the starvation, morale was kept alive by moments that defied explanation. When a companion named Jaber slaughtered a small goat and ground a few handfuls of barley to feed the Prophet and a few friends, the meal multiplied. 1,000 starving workers ate until they were full, and the pot never emptied. Later, the diggers hit a massive, unyielding boulder. The Prophet stepped down, took an axe, and shattered the rock with 3 powerful blows. With each strike, he shouted glad tidings, promising his exhausted followers future victories over the empires of Persia, Syria, and Yemen. Those promises were immediately tested when the Confederate army finally arrived. Expecting an easy slaughter, the 10,000 warriors charged the northern gap and hit a wall of thin air. Their cavalry was completely neutralized by a barrier they had never seen before. Unable to jump the 9-meter gap, the massive army froze. The battle instantly devolved into a grueling exchange of arrow fire across the divide, with the Confederates raining projectiles down on the defenders day after day. A feat of sheer physical engineering stripped the Confederates of their overwhelming numerical advantage. An army that came for a rapid massacre was now forced into a miserable war of attrition. The physical barrier almost broke when Amr ibn Abd Wud, one of Arabia's most feared warriors, found a narrow section of the trench and spurred his horse across. But his breach was cut short when Ali ibn Abi Talib stepped forward and struck him down in a one-on-one duel. But the real danger wasn't coming from across the trench. Right as the defenders were stretched to their absolute physical limits, the Jewish tribe of Banu Qurayza broke their mutual defense treaty with the Muslims. This map shows the spatial terror of this betrayal. Banu Qurayza operated from heavily fortified positions inside the southern part of Medina. The Muslims were now sandwiched between 2 fires, the trench to the north and an active hostile force to the south. The psychological strain was devastating. Hypocrites within the city began spreading rumors and panic, mocking the earlier promises of victory. The Quran captures the sheer terror of this exact moment. Eyes rolled with fear, and hearts reached the throats. An impenetrable physical defense means absolutely nothing when a second front opens up directly behind your own lines. A tactical siege had instantly mutated into a claustrophobic psychological nightmare. Trapped and outmanned, the defenders pivoted to counterintelligence. Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud, a powerful leader from one of the attacking tribes, had secretly accepted Islam. Since no one knew about his conversion, the Prophet deployed him directly back into the enemy camp to sow division. Nu'aym quietly slipped into the fortresses of Banu Qurayza. He convinced the Jewish leaders that if the siege failed, the outside army would simply go home and leave them to face the Muslims alone. To guarantee their allies wouldn't abandon them, he advised the tribe to demand hostages from the Confederates. Nu'aym then visited the Confederate commanders with a different warning. Banu Qurayza had secretly returned to the Muslims. He told the leaders that if the tribe asked for hostages, it was only to hand them over for execution as a peace offering. The trap sprang perfectly. When Banu Qurayza sent word asking for hostages to secure their safety, the Confederate leaders flatly refused. Paranoia consumed the camps, and the entire 10,000-man alliance collapsed into deep mistrust. While a month of physical confrontation had ended in a stalemate, this intelligence work finally broke the alliance from the inside. The final blow to the fractured enemy came from the sky. This image shows the massive wall of dust that struck the Confederate camp in the dead of night, bringing a violently freezing hurricane with it. The storm tore through the camp, shredding tents and blinding the soldiers with whipping sand. The sheer force of the wind sent their starving horses and camels running into the dark in blind panic. Amidst the howling wind, a Muslim scout named Hudayfa crept into the freezing enemy camp. Blending into the darkness, he found a defeated Abu Sufyan warming himself by a fire, ordering his men to pack up and retreat immediately. The month-long siege was broken. The Confederate army fled into the desert without looking back, and the city of Medina was saved from total destruction. Medina had been surrounded and outnumbered for 30 days. By the end, a combination of geography, intelligence, and endurance turned an inevitable conquest into a retreat.